Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results in everything coaching, leadership, and marketing. Please remember to like and share and help us grow our channel even further. Joining me in today's leadership and marketing segment, marketing and communications specialist, Mr. Craig Pasley. How are you doing, Craig?
Hello, Kevin. Yeah, good to be chatting again as we're starting to officially now head towards the end of the year, wrapping up our shows for 2025. Yeah, when we spoke last week, you mentioned you were putting a lot of effort into some exciting prospects for the end of the year into 2026. Are those progressing well for you?
Yeah, we have a number of assessments that are live. So I'm just doing the final testing on them. So it's nice too because I've taken time to create something that will be there forever. So it will be a product that anyone and everyone can use. So it's quite exciting. When it's ready, I think it will kick some ass. So I'm excited about that.
I look forward to doing some beta testing with you on that.
Yes, no, I'm going to share it. Thank you, Craig. So as we kick off today's show, please give us a quick reminder of our key takeaways from last week.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. So as a reminder for our listeners, last week we reviewed the final three themes that were covered in the Data Axle's most recent newsletter that was titled Crowd Favorites, What This Year's Top Content Says About the Industry. The newsletter, again, to reiterate, was published to dataaxle.com on 20 November, and it covers the most read content from Data Axle's communities. And here it's the content's telling a clear story about where leaders are investing, what they're cautious about, and actually what they're planning for next as they move into 2026. So the final three themes that we reviewed are listed as follows. Theme 4 was deliverability, trust, and email performance became priority number 1. Theme 5 is marketers looked to close the gap between intent and impact. And the final theme was Omni-channel and connected TV took center stage. So jumping straight into the quick summaries of those, Theme 4 was then addressed in more detail in the article that I selected titled From Quiet to Clicks, a practical guide to win back campaigns. The article was written by Hiba Khalil and was published to Data Axle on the 15th of August, 2025. And this is what we learned about Theme 4, Kevin. A win-back campaign is a series of targeted, well-crafted messages aimed at re-engaging people who used to be active but have gone quiet. And this is the brand's chance to sort of remind them why they signed up and hopefully to show them enough value to bring them back into the conversation. Theme 5 was covered in the article again that I selected from the list provided. This one was titled 5 Data-Driven Strategies to Engage Key Decision Makers and Business Owners. And the key takeaway here is that engaging decision makers and business owners obviously is no easy task. They are bombarded daily with information, pitches, offers, making it essential to stand out with that tailored, impactful messaging. Data-driven strategies can therefore provide the edge you need to connect meaningfully with that influential audience. And then the final theme that we looked at was covered in the article that I selected titled Key Omni-channel Marketing Trends to Watch in 2025. And I selected that just to see how we had moved through the year and if there was any relevance in what we've experienced. The takeaway here is that 76% of brands say that omni-channel campaigns are essential for long-term growth. It's good to know because that's what we believe, and that unprecedented innovations in generative AI, connected TV, and personalization have definitely made it easier to reach these customers everywhere they are, making developing and effective omnichannel strategies critical for their success. And those are the key takeaways from those last three themes, Kevin.
Craig, I must tell you, we've already implemented some of your insights to our processes.
Yeah,
so
I love it, yes.
We looked at like the messaging and like, okay, so how do we add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and who's it speaking to? How do we, so we're definitely leaning into all of the insight that you're sharing. Yes, I love it.
I love the fact that you're doing it. I see it on a daily basis. It's really impactful. Well done.
Craig, so what do you have in store for us today?
Yeah, Kevin, so I've taken a specific approach for today's episode as the year end is always this time of reflection and contemplation around possible New Year's resolutions for many people. So I did some investigations and research on the topic and learned that as we close out this year in particular, 56% of employers are asking themselves this critical question: does my job align with my long-term goals? And that's really a big burning platform question. An even bigger question then sort of sprung to mind, namely that while employees are reflecting about what their future holds and if they're in the right place, are leaders doing the same level of reflection about their leadership style and ability and how they're going to adapt and move into 2026 to be more effective? So I've titled this conversation in Leadership Reflection and 2026 Themes, and I did some research, GPT, Claude, pulling a couple of articles together and kicking off with what came out as segment 1, where we're going to look at the power of reflection and investigate why leaders actually need to reflect. And I really think this plays perfectly into the space of the business that you operate in.
Yeah, Craig, what I love about this is these assessments that we're doing. We're covering a purpose assessment, we're covering your values assessment, and we're covering your 6 human needs. So in totality, those 3 assessments will give you quite a beautiful overview of, has anything shifted for you? What is more important and less important? It really gets you to unpack yourself to the next level. And this is why it's so important, because leaders do this. Many leaders do it quite often, actually. The fact that this is a conversation is quite exciting. And if everything's ready, I'll put the links in the description box below and people can go check it out.
Fantastic. So, jumping straight into the first piece of information that stood out for me is that, Kevin, only 8% of leaders can be classified as truly strategic. So that in itself was quite a standout. The question, therefore, is, what's the difference between this 8% and the remaining 92%? And the answer to this is that this 8% actually makes dedicated time for deliberate reflection. And as we approach 2026, we note that the pace of change is substantially accelerated. Take note of this. It's increased by 183% from 2019. The 33% increase in the pace of business change just in the last year, Kevin. So for leaders, we note that reflection isn't optional. It actually is essential for staying effective. And a simple approach that leaders can actually adopt to create their reflection practice is noted as follows. And we've touched on one or two of these things in various conversations during the year, but importantly, block out 2 to 3 hours of uninterrupted time on a regular basis. Choose a peaceful environment. Have a journal or a digital tool ready to document your thoughts, and consider doing this with a trusted PR coach that will just help you get deeper into some of those insights that are causing this blockage.
Craig, and what's interesting for people to do this process is, as humans, we get so caught up and so routined by what we're capable of doing, we forget to recognize that we're capable of doing a lot. So when I do any coaching with people, I speak to them as the idea of it is to create a portfolio of evidence of your life for the last year, so that when you reflect back on it, you look at the projects, you look at the moving and shaking, you look at the strategic changes you make, every single element of what your life has done. If you put that into a portfolio of evidence, it's the success of 2025. So such a necessary process that leaders do this and learn it like that, and lean into it like that, because it actually really gets you to reflect about yourself in a far bigger way than just going, yeah, I don't know really what I did this year. It's been a busy year. And you're like, okay, but what does that mean? Right? And a lot of times people don't know because they don't take time to do this practice.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I love the way you've segmented your approach to it, which is a perfect segue into segment 2 of our conversation. And that is titled The 7 Essential Reflection Questions. And the first question that leaders should ask themselves, Kevin, is, why did I change my mind? At least what did I change my mind about this year? So 2 points were highlighted relative to this question. The first is, the best leaders aren't those who cling to being right, Kevin. Very important to understand. They're actually the ones who evolve, and growth drives, at least thrives, at this intersection of curiosity and humility. And I know for a fact that this is very much what you experience with the leaders you work with. The 3 reflection prompts that are suggested for leaders when asking themselves, what did I change my mind about this year, are as follows. The first is, where did I update my mental software? And that goes back to the opening points around finding that quiet, comfortable space that will bring out this creativity and opportunity for reflection. The second reflection prompt is, what long-held beliefs did I change or release? And then the third prompt is, how did changing my mind improve my effectiveness?
Yeah. Craig, I love the fact that, it's asking very specific questions like this, because what's interesting you'll find is because people change, because, you go through life in many ways at different aspects, and we all quite subjective to what our experiences are, the assessments, and that's exactly why they're there. Because half the time
Yes.
when you ask someone, what did I change my mind about? And you're like, I don't know. But the thing is, if you don't know what it is you value, if you don't know what drives your purpose, if you don't know what you need, those become far more difficult to answer. But when you have some kind of structured information about yourself, and then you ask these questions, then you suddenly go, oh, last year this time, something changed, and now I'm here. There's an actual, it's like an insight to your brain, which is beautiful.
And it's a reference point, Kevin. And I really like what you're doing around creating those frameworks because they are reference points.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
moving to the second question that leaders should ask themselves is, what created versus drained my energy? Again, a wonderful question. And two key points are highlighted here. The first is that energy is a leader's most valuable currency, and that understanding your energy patterns helps you design a more sustainable leadership approach. 3 reflection prompts are suggested for the question around what created versus drained my energy. The first prompt here is, which projects, people, and habits filled my tank? The second is, what sapped my enthusiasm and focus? And the third one is, what energy drains can I eliminate or delegate in 2026? And I think delegate's an incredibly important word to understand, because a well-structured team, good leaders would know how they can offload some of the non-important tasks in their particular role or contribution to the business.
Craig, and I just want to add to when you ask this question, sometimes people are not honest enough with themselves. So you actively know that the person you're working with, or your colleague, or your line manager, or your business is actually draining you, right?
Yes.
So, and because you kind of go, well, I don't have any other options. You kind of dismiss it. But when you sit down and you ask yourself the hard question and really delve into that, so that you find what is it that's really draining, then you can suddenly find what is the strategy for me to change this? What is the strategy for me to have the alternative or move? But until you have an absolutely honest conversation, you can't get to the actual thing, because it's supposed to be good. It's supposed to be part of your livelihood or what you've created. You have to be able to answer that honestly, so that you actually get to the problem, the root cause.
And I think the foundational framework in your toolkit there is the values framework. So, what is your purpose? What is the organizational purpose? Are those two aligned? If they're aligned, then it isn't the place and space that's draining you. Then it's the other activities within the place and space. And it could even be the fact that your management team's purpose is misaligned with the organization, and therefore misaligned with you, and therefore putting you under extreme pressure. So again, this really leads to the third question that leaders should ask themselves. And this is, what were my leadership anchors versus boat anchors? And the key point highlighted here is that anchors provide stability, but boat anchors hold you back. And most important is to distinguish the difference between your leadership anchors and the boat anchors. And it plays into the point that I made. If your personal purpose is misaligned with the organizational purpose, right there is a disconnect, and that becomes a boat anchor versus a leadership anchor. And the 3 reflection prompts that was suggested for leaders when asking this question, what were my leadership anchors for versus boat question, at least both anchors, is prompt 1, what people, mindsets, or habits created drag in my leadership? Prompt 2, what foundational practice kept me grounded and effective? And prompt 3, what do I need to let go of to move forward?
Yeah. And also, Craig, and I think that's the word you used is alignment. And you often see it in a coaching session when someone is completely misaligned, that they don't want to get up and go. They don't want to, their attitudes are changed. Their simple chutzpah for doing something is missing, and as soon as you find the alignment, something aligns differently, and everything about your forward motion and movement suddenly changes. So it's a beautiful question to ask, because what is the drag? And, am I completely misaligned, or who is misaligned from me, and how do we fix that? It also comes back to how important the person is or how important the business is. If it's
Yes.
misaligned to that degree and, it's not that important to you, then change it. You're not a
Yes.
tree. You're not planted. Move.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it really gives you
Exactly.
insights to take action.
Yeah. So Kevin, the fourth question leaders should ask themselves is, where did fear hold me back? And a key point to note here is that fear often is masqueraded as practicality or caution. And, this meaningful growth lives on the other side of fear. However, the three reflection prompts that are suggested for leaders to investigate when asking themselves, where did fear hold me back, are noted as follows. So the first prompt is, what opportunity did I avoid due to fear or hesitation? What would have been possible if I'd actually taken the leap? And then the third prompt is, using fear setting, what's the worst thing that could happen and can I handle it?
Great. And when from a human behavior perspective, fear is one of the biggest, most debilitating negative emotions we experience. And very often it is all made up in our minds. So we all just make it up in your head. That's what potentially and it's connected to anxiety. So the more fear I have about a thing that hasn't really happened yet, the more anxious I become. And the moment when you reframe and get hold of what that fear is and where that comes from, and you start knocking the legs out of the fear and come, well, that's not true, and that's not true, and that's not true. You suddenly realize, well, there is no fear, and I'm just making it up in my mind. Like, you don't know that you don't know that you don't know. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting conversation when you really brave enough to have a fear conversation and just like call it what it is, and then eliminate what glue is holding up the table, basically. Because as soon as you do, it starts eliminating it.
And I love what you said, because that's a perfect segue into the fifth question that leaders really need to ask themselves. And this is, what were my greatest hits and worst misses? Because when you understand this, that'll help you really start distilling, particularly when you get to the misses aspect, what the fear components were to that. So a key point to note here is that this isn't about celebration or regret, Kevin. It's about extracting patterns and lessons and making you ready and more purposeful in the next engagement. And the three considerations that are suggested for leaders to explore when asking themselves, what were my greatest hits and worst misses, are noted as follows. So the first one here is, what were my greatest achievements and what contributed to these successes? Then obviously looking at the opposite side of that is, where did things fall short and what did those moments teach me? And again, when you understand the teachings, you'll understand how to eliminate the fear associated with those. And then what patterns emerged from these wins and losses?
Yeah, Craig, and I think that it's, very often, because our brains are primed to keep us safe. So we're always looking at what
Yes.
we couldn't do or didn't do. And we very often, and that's why the portfolio of evidence is so important, because when you get to the portfolio, you actually start seeing, although this thing happened and it was a big miss, this thing happened and that kind of overshadows now, but the acknowledgement is needed, because, and it's just in all humans, because we do something well, we don't recognize it as a skill or an ability that we have that someone else doesn't have. The fact that you and I can be on a screen like this, having a conversation, and we're not freaking out. You and I kind of take it as for granted. We do it often. It's fine. It's easy. Other people have absolute fear and they don't know how to be on screen. And I see it often because I do this so often. So,
Yes.
it's little things that you actually have to start recognizing, as you have the ability to do this thing that some people actually have the biggest fear to do. Hits and misses are absolutely essential.
So, Kevin, the final two questions in this segment are really important, and so would lead to the sixth question that leaders should ask themselves. And this is, how did I invest in my people? And the key point to note here is that your success as a leader is definitely measured by how well your team thrives. The four considerations that are suggested for leaders to evaluate when asking themselves the question of how did I invest in my people are noted as follows. So the first question here is, did I create an environment where my people felt valued and supported? The second question here is, how often did I invest in my team's professional growth? Did my calendar reflect my commitment to developing others? Very important question, that. And then the last point here is, who in my team surprised me with their growth this year?
Craig, what's interesting about this is I wanna raise the flag and say, please note that because you made money this year doesn't mean that you invested in your people.
Great
Some
point.
some leaders, I know I'm speaking about one specific one that
Yeah,
I've worked with before. This person, because they make a lot of money, in her head, that equates to huge success. And you're like, well, your own teams don't like you. They don't function. They don't function well. But because you've hit the whoop a number of times well enough, people just get on with it and get it done. And so that you call success. And, that's for most leaders, many leaders I'm aware of that they don't know how to ask that question and be actually honest. Like, did I actually invest in my people? Because it's not just paying them a salary. It's not about giving them a bonus. Investment in people is there's hundreds and ways of doing that and doing it well. Money is not one of them.
Absolutely, Kevin. The final question on this segment is really important. And this is, how did I show up as a human-centered leader? And the key point to note here is that the research is showing that high empathy leaders far outperform their peers by as much as 40% in coaching, decision-making, and engagement. And I know this is at the front end of the great work that you do. So 4 considerations were suggested here for leaders to assess when asking themselves the question, how did I show up as a human-centered leader? The first consideration here is, did I actively seek and act on feedback? The second is, how effectively did I manage my own emotions? The third is, where did I demonstrate emotional intelligence and empathy? And the fourth is, did I address the whole person, not just the employee?
Yeah, I mean, that even just the last question there, Craig, I think that's so significant because it's usually we just address the problem and to sort it out. We don't address the whole person because essentially people are complex, right? But Craig,
Yes.
how do leaders turn their reflection into action?
Yeah, good question, Kevin, and one that's covered in a piece that I found called the 90-day leadership sprint. The content I covered in the notes around this framework actually helps leaders translate their reflection into results, and it came about in the following recommendations or steps. So steps 1 is covered during week 1 and 2 of your reflection process, and this is titled synthesis. This is about reviewing your reflection answers. It's about identifying those top 3 development priorities and then sharing insights with your trusted advisor or coach, and then you're getting your alignment and actions to build out of that. Step 2 is then covered in weeks 3 and 4 of your journey, and this is titled goal setting. This is about setting 1, 2, or 3 specific and measurable leadership goals for quarter 1 of the year, then aligning goals with the 2026 leadership themes most relevant to your context, that being your business, the industry sector you're playing in, etc., and then building accountability mechanisms, not just for yourself, but for the team supporting you as well. And then step 3, Kevin, is covered in the next 6 weeks, weeks 5 to 12. This is titled implementation. This step is about taking 1 action per week towards each of those goals. It's important about gathering feedback monthly from your collective team and then adjusting based on what you're learning. And learning means also what you're hearing from those that are providing the feedback. Step 4 is the final step, and this is titled creating your 2026 leadership theme. This is about ending your reflection by answering a number of questions, key one being 2026 will be my year of ... And what's really cool is there are 5 examples that were cited. 2026 will be my year of the year of intentional connection, or the year of courageous decisions, or the year of building leaders, or the year of strategic impact, or the year of authentic leadership. The final point to note on this turning a reflection into action is that these themes, or this particular headline theme that you choose, actually becomes your North Star for decision making throughout the year ahead, Kevin.
I love that the step 4 over here speaks about creating your 2026 leadership theme. And,
Yes.
people are, I think a lot of leaders that do this type of practice and do this type of work are aware of the fact that they are co-creating what they are wanting to put out in the world. But sometimes people don't realize that you actually have more ability to create the world you want to experience and the world you want to live in.
Yeah.
So when you see it from this context and you hear all the previous conversation we've just had, it really starts solidifying that when you are reflective to that degree and you have the ability to ask yourself the hard questions, part of getting to the clarity of that means that you can get to this point of creating a better intentional year for 2026. And I think a lot of people, I'm so glad that this is a conversation that we're having at the end of the year, because it's a beautiful thinking process for people to really tie into and to reflect on. And this is a beautiful questionnaire to actually go by.
It is. It really, really is. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed, doing the research around these particular topics. So in closing, my final piece for today is I'm just going to list some of the great references and resources that I access this information from. But before doing that, 3 key points to remember on the conversation for today, Kevin. The first is that leadership is not a journey, at least a destination, but a journey of continuous growth. And as you step into 2026, commit to leading with purpose, with humility, and this relentless drive to create environments where people and your organization thrive. The second point, and our point, is that the leaders who will succeed in 2026 aren't those who have all the answers. They're the ones who ask better questions, stay curious, adapt quickly, and never stop growing. And I really love that point. And then the third point here is the question isn't whether you will face your challenges in 2026. You will. That's inevitable. The question is, what kind of leader will you choose to become in the face of those challenges? And I think that is just the most amazing question to end this particular topic on. Then, before wrapping up, I just want to reference those resources. These include the likes of Korn Ferry's Global Workplace 2025 Survey, Boyden's Global Leadership Trends 2025 Report, EDR's Global Leadership Forecast 2025, some great Gallup research on purpose and performance, the Tim Ferriss fear-setting framework we've discussed before, and then a lovely one-to-one journaling method for ongoing reflection, Kevin. And that's it from our side.
That's fantastic, Craig. I love that. I love that sentiment about the question isn't whether you'll face challenges, because you will. And it reminds me of a sentiment that I don't know if you know Leanne Morgan. She's a comedian. She's like quite a new comedian in America. She tells me of her father, not wanting to go and do her work on her degree. And her father says to her, well, Leanne, you might as well, if you go and do your degree, you're still going to be 26. But if you don't go and do your degree, you're still going to be 26. So you got a choice. You may as well go and do it. And then you're 26 with a degree. And it's so
I love it.
And it just speaks to that challenges that, invariably we will have challenges. But how you set out the year and how you design the North Star for how 2026 is for you is entirely your decision. So you can either design it and be part of that process and lean into it thoroughly, or you can have those challenges and you just don't have a plan, right?
Yep.
It's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. Craig, so the quote for today is, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. From Will Durant.
Beautiful. That's fantastic, and just like such a perfect end to this conversation.
Yeah, I think that. Thank you, Craig. I think the insights from this as well. It gives us a nice, because here we are in December. It gives us something practical to do. So anyone listening out there, I'm also going to take these questions. I'm going to put it in the description box so people can right there wherever you are reading it or listening. And then also, I'll share it wherever I can. Craig, thank you so much for today. Have we got one more show for the year?
Yes. I've got some other really great and nice follow-on from this on some leadership components as well, just ending the year on a good opportunity for leaders around the self-reflection, but also just stepping into readying themselves for a great year ahead.
Fantastic. Guys, please remember to like and share and join us on the Lunchtime Series every Wednesday and Thursday. From myself and Craig, have a fantastic week. Craig, I'll chat to you soon. Cheers for now.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a good one. Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.